Hello everyone! In today's video, I'll show you how I set up this hydroponic bucket system I got from Vevor. I planted 8 celebrity tomato plants in these buckets, and I'm very excited about having them outside for a change. Normally, I set up my hydroponic systems indoors, but the sun is a free and a very effective light source, so these tomato plants are going to have the good stuff, at least for the summer. There's also more room outside for me to grow, but once the fall comes, I'll have to set these up indoors. I guess I'll just have to find more space in my ever-expanding grow area, or should I say, my ever-growing grow area. And of course, the plants indoors will need grow lights. What you see here can be done indoors just as easily as long as you have the space and the lights. This can also be a do-it-yourself project. You would have to buy all the materials, of course, but I built this system with a kit I got from Vevor. The kit is actually very reasonably priced, especially compared with other systems. You can see here on Amazon an 8-bucket system is around $165, and they give you everything, including the check valves to make sure the water doesn't back up into the pump, and air stones, and even the clay pebbles. The system I reviewed in my last video was much more expensive, and they didn't include the check valves, the air stones, or the clay pebbles. So let's see what we have here in the box. It seems to be packed really very well. Right on top are the net cups. These are 5-inch baskets, which is just fine. And there's a hole here in the lid so you can add more water or nutrients if you need to. These blue tubes are to check on the water level. I'll show you how that works once I set up the buckets. And then this bag has all the connectors and the check valves. More about that later. Here we have a pretty heavy box, and it has an air pump inside. It's a pretty heavy-duty pump, which you would need for an 8-bucket system. Here is some airline tubing to connect from the air pump to the buckets, and here we have some sort of a splitter with 8 ports, one for each of the 8 buckets, and an instruction manual, really just a sheet. It doesn't have a lot of words, just a diagram. It is a simple system to set up, but for a newbie, there really should be some more instructions, not just a diagram. And then we have the buckets. These are 5-gallon buckets, and in between the buckets were 4 bags of clay pebbles, just enough for 8 plants. Here you can see everything that was in the box, all laid out. Here are the tomato plants I'm planning on planting in these buckets. This is a 9-pack I got from the garden center at Lowe's. They are celebrity tomatoes. Usually I start tomatoes from seeds, but it didn't happen this year for many reasons. And these look nice and healthy, so it's all good. Here's the instruction sheet. There's a good diagram here that shows how to connect the water level tube so that you can check how much water is in the bucket without lifting the lid. And the diagram also shows how the buckets are connected to the pump. It's really a very simple system, but this instruction sheet might not be enough for a beginner, someone who doesn't have any experience growing hydroponically. I think for the beginner, there should be a little more information included here. Well, I guess that's what YouTube is for, right? The system comes with 8 air stones. This is the 8-pin connector to connect to the pump outlet. Here's the elbow connector for the water level tube. You need 2 elbow connectors for each bucket, and they'll be inserted into the 2 holes you see here. This is the seal ring, so you push 1 in each hole and then push the elbow connector into the seal ring. And this is the inline check valve. Here you can see how the elbow connector fits into the seal ring. I'm just showing how it fits together, but first you have to push the seal ring into the hole in the bucket and then fit it in the elbow connector, I think. I'm not sure it makes a difference what order you do it in, but that's how I did it, and it fit nice and tight with no leaks. So just push the seal ring into the 2 holes, one at the bottom of the bucket and one closer to the top. Next, I pushed into the seal rings the 2 elbow connectors. Then I took the water level tube and connected it with the bottom connector, and then measured using my eyeballs. Don't cut the tube too short, and too long is also not good, but at least you have another chance to cut it if you cut it too long. But if you cut it too short, well, that's a problem. So then I snipped off the top. That was easy to cut, but since it was my first time, I did cut it a bit too long, so I struggled a bit trying to put the other end into the top elbow. Once I removed the elbow from the seal ring, I was able to get the blue tube into it. I finally figured out that I should first put the blue tube into the elbow piece first, and then push the whole thing into the seal ring. Here you can see it all connected, and there's a slight bow in the blue tube, and that's because I cut it a tad too long, but it's okay, it will do the job. And now I know for the next bucket to cut just a bit more so the tube will be straight. So here's another chance. This is the second bucket, and I was having a little trouble getting the bottom seal ring into the hole here, but I guess that's a good thing. It ensures a watertight seal. Next, I put the top seal ring in, and now they're both in. Next, I put the bottom elbow connector in. Now, this time I'm not putting the top elbow in just yet. I inserted the blue tube into the bottom elbow, and then I measured where I should cut by holding the top elbow piece where it will go, but not inserting it just yet. I measured, I snipped, and then inserted the blue tube into the top elbow, and then the whole piece into the seal ring at the top of the bucket. And there you have it. The second bucket is done, and just 6 more to go. Here you can see what the bucket looks like from the inside. I have the buckets all lined up in a row. I think that's best since the sun will hit each of them equally and they won't cast a shadow on one another. This is a southern exposure, and it's just before noon now. You can see the sun high up in the sky, so even with the tall trees surrounding us, this deck will get plenty of sunshine. Unfortunately, because of the trees, the deck gets lots of seed pods and pollen and other stuff falling on it. The lids on the buckets have holes for adding nutrients and water, so the kit comes with these rubber plugs, and I'll go ahead and put those on each of the buckets. Now it's time to set up the pumps. It's a nice heavy pump, and here is the airline tubing. It looks like enough. I hope it is. Since I have the buckets lined up in a row, I'll have to measure just right to make sure I have enough. If not, it's not hard to get more, but I think this should be enough. It comes as one long piece, so I can cut it to any length I need to. Here's the splitter with 8 outlets, and it fits onto the pump easily. And then I realized there's this black rubber piece. It's not mentioned in the instructions, but now that I saw it, I figured it must be to give a better seal for the airflow, so I put that on, and then I put on the splitter. Now the airline tubing is going to go onto each of these pins, but first I need to use the check valves. The valves are marked out on one side, so that's for the airflow to go out through. It has to be positioned like this, except it doesn't fit onto the port, so I need to cut some airline tubing and then connect it. The instruction sheet does have a picture of what it should look like, so that was helpful. I connected one end of the airline tubing to one of the ports on the splitter, and then cut it off from the rest of the roll so that there was just a small piece attached to the splitter. Now you can see the check valve has out written on one side, so the other side is in, and that's the side that gets attached to the piece of airline tubing I just connected to one of the ports. It doesn't go on easily, which is good. That way it doesn't come off easily either. There, I've got one on, 7 more to go. Now I have to measure and cut 7 more small pieces of tubing. Here they are. And now I have to put these small pieces onto the splitter, and there you go. Now all of the small pieces of tubing are connected to the splitter, so now I have to put the check valves on, and here they are, all the check valves on the tubing. This is when I realized that the diagram had the check valves staggered so that they don't all line up and bump into each other. I didn't notice that when I was looking at the picture, but it's okay. The tubing is flexible enough, so it will be fine. Here's how the check valves should look with the out written on this side. And now I just need to connect it to the air pump. And then I plug the pump in just to make sure it's working. And there is air coming out of the ports, so it is working. Now that that's done, I'm going to measure and cut the rest of the airline tubing, and the other end is going into this hole near the top of the bucket, and then I need to attach the air stone on the other end that goes into the water. I finished connecting all 8 buckets to the pump. Everything seems to be working just fine. I filled the buckets with RO water, that's reverse osmosis water from my filter, and that took me quite a while to do. And you can see there's debris from the trees floating in the water. I'm going to have to use a strainer to fish those out later. The next step is to add the nutrients to the water. I use the Master Blend formula for my tomatoes and other fruiting plants, so I added that to the buckets. Next, I cleaned the soil off all the tomato plants. Then I threaded some of the roots as carefully as I could through the net cup baskets, and then surrounded the plants with clay pebbles. By the way, I washed the clay pebbles very well first, otherwise you'll get the dust from the clay all over you and into the water, so make sure to rinse the clay pebbles off before you use them. I planted some more tomato plants in grow bags on the deck, so I've got lots of tomatoes growing, both in grow bags and in the buckets. One way or another, we should have some really juicy tomatoes in a couple months, if not sooner. I'll keep you all updated. Thanks for watching. Bye.